Nathaniel, and we are here to talk to you about a whole host of things today. Most importantly, Winterspell has been revealed. All the cards are out there in the world now that we can start proxying and playtesting with and just building new decks. And I'm having a lot of fun with that already. I know both of you are as well, and we're going to talk a lot about the new effects that are incoming for this new set, and also a lot of our new favorite cards that we want to start playing and playing with. But first, before we get into all that, let's start with our favorite. What's new in your world? Nathaniel, kick us off.
So I will start with a Lorcana perspective. I have been definitely getting excited about the new card pool. It feels like there's going to be some really fun stuff you can do in this set. Um, we'll talk about the cards actually more later. But getting excited, hopefully going to be able to do one of the sealed events on release day. Have already checked that off with the wife, made sure everything looks good there. So very excited about that. I truly love the excitement of the sealed events on the release weekend, or in this case pre-release weekend, right? So that's just I'm super pumped for that. That's only a week and a half or so away. That's going to be awesome. From a personal life perspective, my wife and I did something I think anyone out there who's a parent would kind of be like, oof, yikes, that must have been a tough day. But we went to bed early 2 nights in a row so that on Sunday morning we could get up at 3 a.m. to watch the Australian Open final because it's the timing of that is nighttime for them, which is 3 a.m. for us in central time zones. Sure, you could just tape it, watch it later, but we were like, look, I don't want anything to get spoiled. I just want to watch it happen live as it happens. If we have to, maybe we can take a nap during the kids' nap time or whatever. Let's just see what we can do. And I still got like a decent night's sleep. I was definitely dragging by the end of the day, but it was really fun to watch it happen live. I'm a huge fan of professional tennis. I played in high school, and it's a forever sport in a way, right? Like it's a lifetime sport. You can play it a long time, and even if your body's not like as good as it once was, you can keep playing. So that was really cool. I'm a big fan of the guy who won, who now has the career Grand Slam at just 22 years old. So that's unbelievable. That while most people are like the age they would be like graduating college, this guy has a career Grand Slam. What? Oh my gosh. So that was super fun. And I was just really proud of my wife for also committing to waking up at 3 a.m. on a Sunday morning. Mac, what's new in your world?
To your point about lifetime sports, I'm the same way with golf. And golf has a new superstar, not really new, but for the past couple seasons with Scotty Scheffler. So I'm very much in the same idea of these single sports, lifetime sports. I feel the same way about golf, and that's just around the corner for me as well. New in my world, though, our family got hit with a minor head cold case. It started with our two boys and now has hit me and my wife. Thankfully, it's not the worst sickness we've had over this very rough, I think, winter season for us. It's just more so kind of it's a lot more drainage and nose related rather than just feeling like you're just a pile on the couch for a while, right? But other than that, Lorcana related, very much starting the theory craft. I built my first two red-blue decks, as we alluded to on the podcast last week. I am so excited for red-blue and its potential comeback. So I am not a theory crafter, as I've said multiple times before. I am the certified picker of the group. But the Winterspell craze with red blue has inspired me to start building some decks on my own and seeing where that takes me. So very much excited to see where this goes. But unfortunately, we still have to wait 10 days. And I don't want to wait that long. I'm getting a little antsy about it. But here we go. I'm so excited for the next set. And especially like as we get into the spring season too, I don't know. Everything's starting to get exciting in this area. I mean, we're still just starting February, but spring is right around the corner too. And then with Winterspell, and I don't know, it's all going to come together towards what's soon to be one of my favorite times of the year in the springtime. So, Ryan, what's new in your world?
Personal front, first and foremost, we had a birthday party for one of our oldest little one, and so that was huge. They leveled up a year in their life. They leveled up their sleeping arrangement recently. We're starting to really turn the corner with some milestones, and obviously it's heavy on the parents' heart. when those milestones start toppling over and getting ticked off. But at the same point, it's really like a very proud moment and really like exciting and encouraging and invigorating to like see them reach these milestones and start to grasp some of these, you know, concepts of being a functional human in today's society. So we had family over. It was a great time. Lots of great presents, lots of great new toys and books and things like that that we get to enjoy with our little one, and cake and ice cream and all those delicious treats too. So birthday party was a huge success, and cake was exactly what they wanted. They got the decorations they wanted. The like look of joy on their face and the squeal of little children running around the house is always a treasure that I'm trying to keep around us for as long as we can. As long as we can handle it with our patience and with our organization and cleaning skills. On a Lorcana front, I'm super excited about the new set. I already have 2 decks sleeved with proxies ready to go for whenever y'all want to play test. So just hit me up, let me know. I'm planning on sleeving 1 more at least tomorrow, and maybe finishing up a 4th one tomorrow as well. And we'll start there, and we'll see where we get after that. But yeah, got online with resident Uncle Scrooge, Connor, yesterday, and finished up some deck building just as a starting point and seeing where we're gonna go. So red blue seems back? Question mark? Maybe? Seems pretty good. It seems like there's enough catch-up mechanics. Seems like there's enough control mechanics to like get across the finish line and control the board back. But we'll see. We'll see how fast some of those aggro decks can go, because it seems like there's some gas for those aggro decks to fuel off of this set. So we shall see. I'm excited to see how the set fully turns out. First, before we get into explaining kind of some of the new effects, talk about the cards in Winterspell, we did want to talk about a couple of DLC-related events. There was a DLC this weekend in Hong Kong that had a unique finish, to say the least, and I'll let Nathaniel get more into that. And then there's also a recent video posted by another content creator, CurleyCards, on his YouTube channel, that was highlighting another unique event, a unique happening in DLC Richmond that involved a little bit of on-stream, unsportsmanlike conduct, I'll say. But I'll let Nathaniel kind of dive into the conversation, and we'll go from there. Nathaniel, take it away.
Yeah, so I think first and foremost, I think anytime that we talk about something that might be a bit contentious, or, you know, it's differing opinions, etc., right? Like a charged topic, right? Like we want to like just set the level of like, hey, we understand that everybody makes mistakes. Judges are people, right? And like we're all living in a very imperfect world, right? Everything's not always going to go to plan. I think we can just sometimes give feedback where appropriate and try to be better for the next time. Right? The kind of this continuous growth mindset. I think about that as a player myself, how I, you know, conduct myself in local tournaments or bigger ones, right? Like just try to be better every time you go out, and you could be as minimal as like how you're acting, and it could be as things like, you know, granular how you're making plays or misplays, right? Like just keep leveling up. That being said, I think we can also acknowledge one other thing, in the sense that like the DLCs themselves are supposed to be the highest level of Lorcana tournament experience for the very competitive players, etc. And they're all going to be run a little bit different. They're being run all over the world. So the way that everything happens in Milwaukee might be very different than what happens in Hong Kong. Great example of this. They played best of ones in Hong Kong through many of the first rounds. So, you know, if you've ever played in a best of one, it's kind of crazy. There's like a huge amount at stake in that one game. But that's how they ran it, right? And I think that's fine, right? That was their decision. However, this is where I think we're going to start to talk a little bit about like how, hey, for next time, let's do better. They determined that they were going to go best of 3 for the final, which I think is good, right? Like, yeah, I think at the DLCs that we've seen often in North America, they do best of 5 in the final, the grand final, whatever, right? Where it's going to be probably pretty lengthy. I think Mack talked about how like the blue-green mirror final that happened in Richmond was like a 2.5-hour match, like crazy, right? So they add a couple games, which I think it's always a good thing. More Lorcana, great. What they didn't do is they didn't make it untimed. So the DLC final in Game 3 was determined based on the match going to time. So the player who won Game 3 was at like 9 lore, and they won the tournament. Which I cannot fathom that being a thing. I just would hope that the feedback from this is why we have untimed things, right? And maybe that was in the rule book that, you know what, we're not going to do, we are going to have a certain amount of time allotted for whatever reason. That was part of the way this was being conducted. Okay. But for the future, this is why even at like a set champs level, right? We have something in there that says once you get to like the top cut or top 4, right? Or whatever, you move to untimed rounds. Like, don't let that be the reason why somebody like doesn't win the tournament, right? And this is exactly why. So I think that was the first big takeaway I had. The other one was around a judge ruling. And again, I think this is why I prefaced this with the fact of like, hey, judges are imperfect and we are all imperfect as well, and we make misplays and we make mistakes. So I think there were a couple mistakes that happened, and what ultimately resulted from that, I think, was very unfortunate, and it kind of feels like it was a shame in a big way, beyond the fact that Game 3 went to time. And in Game 2, now again, this is the DLC final in Game 2, one player had a Cheshire Cat and an Elsa with 2 damage on it. They moved 2 ink, they grabbed a card from the top of their deck to boost the Cheshire Cat. Now, in doing so, right, and anyone who's played a purple deck from the last set knows, right, sometimes you're going to boost the cat and you're going to move damage from something else. Well, in doing like that many different things, right, they actually slid the card under the Elsa and started to grab the dice to move the 2 damage onto the opponent's character, and the opponent immediately caught it, pointed at the Cheshire Cat, and the players, oh yeah, and moved the card, the boosted card, which was still face down, underneath the Cheshire Cat, and then moved the 2 damage from Elsa onto the opponent's character. I would think with how quickly this happened, it probably was under the wrong card for all of 1.5 seconds. It was very, very brief. It's just a quick like, oh yeah, dexterity issue, nothing about the game state or nothing was altered by the fact that he put the card underneath the wrong card for a split second. Well, ultimately what happened was created a judge call, which then resulted in a game loss. So that player lost because they put their face down boost card under the wrong card. Now, I think context is extremely important here. We did find out that from the stream, at least, that there were a couple other judge calls or misplays of this kind of type of thing, not maybe the exact play, by that player. So because this was kind of like a third strike on the day, or over the course of the tournament, this was then ruled as a game loss because it was his third infraction. I think it's important to acknowledge the fact that, like, yes, when you make continuous things, like if that is in the rule book, then that's the rules. I also think I am a huge proponent for understanding just ruling based on sometimes like severity of something. This was so incredibly minor and so not game altering in any way, and such like an obvious, like, of course you could see how that could happen pretty easily. And there clearly wasn't any ill intent, and he immediately like fixed it, and he probably would have realized it himself if his opponent hadn't immediately called it, right? I just think that you have to kind of recognize the moment there and just say, hey, like, this isn't to the same level of like a bigger kind of mistake or misplay based on the cards, right? And it is the final. So like, I just think you sometimes have to like take the moment for what it is. And I feel like going as far as ruling a game loss in that situation just feels really bad. And I think, Ryan, you brought up something really great today when we were talking about this, in the spirit of like where Lorcana's going with like take backs and like these types of things, right? This is a great example of not even to the full extent of like a take back, right? Like, it's just the card was slid an inch to the right, and was fixed so fast that I just would think this was such a nothing burger, and the fact that it turned into more is just really kind of sad. And then when you couple it with the fact that Game 3 was decided on time, the player who won the DLC never reached 20 lore in the final. So like, I think that's not a good thing for Lorcana, right? Like, you want there not to be controversy where possible, and you want it to feel like it's all earned. And I think, I credit that player who did win the DLC. Amazing performance. You don't get to the final in the first place without playing really well. And I think, for what it's worth, he probably would have won Game 2 without winning off of the DQ. It just feels like it's a stain on an otherwise, big moment for the game. I'll just say that.
Yeah. I have a lot of thoughts about this whole DLC experience. And Nathaniel, thank you for kind of laying the groundwork and providing all the background on what happened in that finals. But I have thought a lot about it over the course of today when I saw the rerun of the stream and truly what happened in the moment. And I personally think This is unacceptable from the organizer's standpoint. And I think there was no harm done by the player in this specific scenario. I will reiterate the point that you made, Nathaniel, is they had made it clear on the stream that throughout the course of the DLC, this specific player, of which was, given the game loss, this was his third, I forget how they put it, but it was like minor infraction throughout the course of the DLC, and that was his third strike, so therefore he was given a game loss. And I understand that perspective, but in the finals of a DLC, for something that was, in my opinion, nothing, you could clearly see on the stream, to your point, it was an Elsa with 2 damage and a Cheshire Cat. He paid the 2 ink, grabbed the card. It was still face down. It wasn't like the card was flipped over, so we had information gained as to what the boosted card was. Card was still face down, and you could see he was doing everything simultaneously. He inadvertently put the card under Elsa because at the same time he was grabbing the dice on Elsa to move it over to his opponent. My assumption was he would have been like, oh shoot, my mistake, and he would have quickly moved it over to Cheshire Cat, and that's exactly what his opponent pointed out. I think there was no information gained. The state of the board didn't change. It was a simple like, oh shoot, I meant to put it over here, and it was right there. Silly me. That's what it felt like to me. It was a, oh darn, silly me moment, right? And you could tell his opponent too was like, yeah, just remember to put your card under Cheshire Cat and not the Elsa. Just kind of a friendly reminder situation. And the fact that it resulted in a game loss of the finals, I think is personally a very bad look. I will say, and for the record, in the sense of when they announced Season 2 DLCs, I was very much a fan, and have been a fan, ever since they announced the list of where they're going for DLCs, of broadening the DLC field to especially Asian regions. Asian regions tend to do very well in TCGs, and I can understand from a business perspective and just expanding the game why you would want to have DLCs expanded in Singapore, China, Hong Kong, Japan, that's a good market to be in. And the fact that this happened at Hong Kong, one of those first DLC moments, I think is a very bad look on Ravensburger, the team organizers. I don't know who's involved, so maybe I shouldn't have put names to that, but whoever was involved in the team organizing aspect of this, I think for the infraction that was given didn't really justify like the means in this scenario, right? And it's truly unfortunate that player then lost game 2. And then, which I think on top of that, an even bigger controversy is your point about game 3 going to time. And then all of a sudden, we got past it. We're going on to game 3. It was a 1-1. And then if you could see the timer, like game 3 started with 7 minutes left. And you just kind of knew where this game was headed. And especially in a blurple mirror match, those games tend to go long. And I'm actually more frustrated with the fact that the DLC was decided at turns. Keep in mind, like, this isn't like your small, this isn't like a 10K. This is a DLC. The winner gets an automatic worlds bid. And it was determined in an 8-minute game that was inevitably going to go to time. You could tell the players weren't playing the board as they normally would. They were just trying to turn sideways as fast as possible and gain lore as much as possible, because at the end of turns, it was just whoever had the most lore was going to win the game. And I think it's quite a shame that a DLC and a world's participant, a world spot was determined in this type of finals. I'll shut up now and let Ryan speak. But I just think it's a shame that for them trying to expand this card game, this is the look that they had when they've tried to expand in a region where they were truly trying to broaden the game out.
I think it's also fair to acknowledge too, right? Again, that judges are people too. They're not always going to be perfect on everything. A lot of these folks are volunteers. Like, we're not coming after a judging staff by saying this, or that, like, hey, you made a big mistake, shame on you, right? Like, I think it's just more so the fact that, like I referenced watching the Australian Open, right? And they talked about how, like, the coaching staff of some of these players, there's a skill set here of, like, knowing when to provide coaching points and certain technical tweaks and when to not. And I felt like this was maybe a moment to just say, hey, it's the final. Let's read the room. It's such a minor thing. This probably doesn't need to warrant a third infraction, right? We could just say, very minor thing. Don't do that again. And just move on, right? Just kind of read the context of the situation, the gravity of the situation from the boost issue here. I think from the organization, the fact that this was a timed final, I think that's the part that we're kind of like, hey, for the future, please don't do that again. So it's like there's kind of 2 points, I think, of feedback here. One in the sense of, like, for finals, you don't have to change the rule book, but just, I think there is some context that's important to like be a part of in that huge of a moment. And then to, like, the organizing staff, that, like, any grand final should always be untimed. No matter if it's best of 3, best of 5, whatever it is, don't make that time, because it's just not a great way to end a huge tournament. It just leaves you with a really weird feeling that doesn't feel the same way as when somebody wins this 2.5-hour grind fest at Richmond, or Frank Karsten wins a battle in 5 games in Milwaukee, right? Like, you just feel like, wow, great. Like, you get to celebrate that person's performance and not be left with this, like, weird feeling of, well, that kind of sucked, So I think that's where I come at it from, is we're not necessarily coming after any individual here. We're just saying that this could have been handled better, and I think that there's very much a huge opportunity to do it better and differently next time.
I think that's a very good point, Nathaniel, that, like, this is just hey, let's just bring awareness to it, and let's just try to do it better next time, and take some learning points away from it what we can. I think there is something to be said about, yes, you need to enforce the rules as they're written. But I do think that there's, like, even the fact that this was, the third infraction, the clear penalty for that is game loss. But then, does it really need to be a third infraction at that point? I agree with both of your points that I don't personally feel like it was a major enough infraction to be like, hey, there's, like, clear possible intent there. It was just like a dexterity issue where he slipped it under the wrong card. It seemed almost like the opponent, from what I gleaned, and I didn't have live audio of the event, but it seemed like the opponent was just like, hey, just move that card over and we're just going to keep playing. It's fine. But then the judge stepped in and said, hey, pause. Like, there was something that happened there. What happened? Let's figure this out. To then, like, escalate it to the point where it became a game loss. I don't know that it necessarily needed to be, but that's just personal opinion. Obviously, there could be some cultural differences between America and Hong Kong and how they, like, abide and follow these rules, and there is no room for interpretation potentially in their mind. And so, like, this is a black and white infraction, third infraction, game loss, move on, let's go to game 3. I didn't pay close enough attention to see if they actually extended time for them as a result of the time that it took for the judge call to occur. And so then that would be another compounding factor that I would want to go back and just double check on if I were to speak on it any further. But in the essence of time, I think y'all made perfect points, and I appreciate what y'all said. And I just want to reiterate again for a third time for the listeners that we don't want to intend this to be like an egregious attack on any front, on anybody, any tournament organizer, or any particular judge or judge staff. Just the fact that, like, hey, awareness that this happened. These are the events that occurred during the DLC final in Hong Kong, and that it's not something that we're hoping that changes are going to be made for the future events in that regard. Because it is a great time. It is fun just to watch these high-level players play really good Lorcana and very clean technical abilities, and sometimes there's just dexterity issues happen no matter what, especially after long days of tournaments. Especially when you juxtapose the Hong Kong event, DLC final, where there was this, like, dexterity issue that was, like, didn't seem like there was much intent to it, to what was recently posted by what I recently saw came to my attention from CurleyCards of an event that happened at DLC Richmond that I think I'll pass it to Mack here to kind of explain what happened there. But I'll offer my 2 cents quick so we can move on to Winterspell as soon as possible, because that's what I'm really excited to talk about. When I saw the event, when I saw CurleyCards' video and watched the event that happened at DLC Richmond, I thought like, okay, that is a clear infraction. That is a clear intent, and there is clear benefit gained from the action that was taken. And so those are two very different scenarios to me, where it's just I'm in the same camp that like there needs to be some intent, there needs to be some potential for the intent for me to agree that there was an infraction that occurred that then would lead to a game loss, especially in even in the first round of an event or third round of an event. If it's a third occurrence in the third round, then like, I don't know. It just feels like the dexterity issue of slipping under the wrong card does not warrant a game loss in that regard. But I'll pass it to Mack to talk us through what happened with the Richmond event, and then we'll get to Winterspell, because I'm super pumped to talk about those cards.
Yeah, let's talk about Richmond. And this one kind of caught me a little bit off guard when the CurleyCards dropped the video on and expressing and explaining what happened at Richmond. From all of our perspective and what we heard from people who went to Richmond, Richmond ran really, really smoothly, especially when compared to kind of the lessons learned from Milwaukee. Not to say Milwaukee didn't go smoothly, but you could tell from Milwaukee it was like, oh, they hadn't hosted an event in 9 months, whereas in Richmond, they definitely used the lessons learned from Milwaukee and applied a lot of those to Richmond, and I think it went off to a great success from what we hear from the people who attended. So with the Richmond controversy and what was explained in the CurleyCards video, there was a match on stream, and this is key, on stream, this happened. Round 3, there was a blue-green match versus dogs match, Emerald, Amber. And during that match, there was a situation where someone had slipped a card from their inkwell into their hand, and it wasn't caught by the stream, the judge, or the opponent. So to set the stage, there was a point in the game where this dogs player had 6 cards in their inkwell, and they had divided the cards up into certain ways to play cards. What they were trying to do with this specific matchup, for those of you who don't know, is this blue-green player was running Spooky Sight. And Spooky Sight is a very scary card for those dog matchups, because a lot of those cards are 1, 2, 3 drops. And if you see Spooky Sight, it's a semi board wipe for the dogs player, whereas the dogs player wants to get a lot of cards out, play tramps on top of each other, and then ultimately turn sideways to win the game. So in that matchup, this player was trying to play Ursula Deceivers, and specifically Mowgli's, to try and see what was in their opponent's hand, catching a Spooky Sight, and hopefully with those Mowgli's, discarding the Spooky Sight. Now, giving credit to the Emerald Blue player, they knew that this was going to be the case, and always made it a point to have 2 actions in hand. For those of you who don't remember, the Mowgli card from set 10 is when you play this character, the opponent reveals their hand and discards a non-character card of their choice. Not like Bare Necessities, where you get to choose the card. It's your opponent's choice. And this is key, because if you have 2 actions in hand, especially with Spooky Sight being one of them, you always choose the other action so that you still have the Spooky Sight in your hand to be played. So, long explanation there. But there was a point in the game where there was 6 ink on board for the dogs player, and they had played all their ink to try and snipe the Spooky Sight. Well, they missed. And inevitably, the blue-green player was set up at that point in the game with 6 ink to play the Spooky Sight to kind of wipe the board, and then what blue-green wants to do is take over, control the game, and win, right? And but the way that the cards were oriented in the inkwell, it was 3, 2, and then 1, but the 1 card was kind of off to the side. And when the blue-green player played the Spooky Sight, kind of in all the chaos of trying to organize where the cards go in the inkwell, while the dogs player was playing or grabbing his cards, putting them in the inkwell, he grabbed that 1 card that was off to the side and slipped it into his hand. It was an Ursula Deceiver, I don't really think the card matters. It just happened to be a character card. Within the next couple turns, that illegal card now in his hand was played on the board, and this Ursula Deceiver ended up questing for like 3, 4, 5 lore throughout the course of the rest of the game, of which was enough for the Dogs player to ultimately win the game and win the match. It's crazy because this all happened on stream. No one caught it, to my earlier point. And I think from what I hear, the situation wasn't resolved until day 2, of which, again, this happened on round 3 very early in day 1. I think ultimately it's very important to point out that the person who did perform the infraction, they very much, you could see it in intentional infraction, was disqualified throughout the event. But I think we wanted to talk about it on this episode is from us coming from traditional sports, seeing cheating, especially something with intent, just kind of rubs us the wrong way, and it makes it, I don't know, it's puzzling to me that as positive as this community has been for us, that it's almost inevitable that this, like, something like this can happen. Like, I can't even like conceptualize that thought that someone would want to do this. So I'm curious what your guys' thoughts were on, maybe Nathaniel, you can take it from here. Like, what were your thoughts on this whole situation with Richmond that we're soon finding out, just hours ago?
I think Ryan's point earlier, right, of like how there's levels where it's like honest mistakes, like the Hong Kong slide the card into the wrong card thing, and then there's like clear intent to cheat. I don't want to like pitchforks, the big cheater, we don't like you, or anything like that. I just think there's ways to go about anything competitive the right way and the wrong way, and it just feels like if you win the wrong way, there just isn't the same level of like joy and satisfaction. Like you didn't do it within the bounds of like what you should have, and like for me it just feels really, really icky, and I think that's why it's hard for me to kind of understand, like, I think, and it's worth noting, right? Like anytime there's a big tournament, there's lots of dollars at stake in this, right? Like there is probably a little bit of a greater incentive to sort of, bend the rules or get around things. I get that. But I just think that the competitor in me personally just feels like I would only want to earn wins. I wouldn't want to cheat to get them. So I think that's in some ways really frustrating. And like coming from that traditional sports background, I think you're really like, what it's like to like put in the work and, achieve victory through hard work and dedication versus cheating.
I think that hits the nail on the head with how I feel about it too, is just that even it is very tempting sometimes in those situations if you feel like there's something you can do to win the game, if it's in that realm of potential cheating or unsportsmanlike conduct to get there. Even though the loss may sting as a result of it, I think that and it sticks with you, it's still worth it to do the right thing and play it the right way. And that's I just want good Lorcana to win out at the end of the day. Clean, play the cards, and the cards determine the winner. That's the type of game I want to play. Same with want the course of the game to determine the winner in any types of sporting event, not like an egregiously hard foul or somebody gets injured because of the hard foul, or somebody cheats this to get an extra point or a goal on the scoreboard by using a handball or a handball tactic or something like that to earn a victory in that way. So that's effectively how I think y'all hit the nail on the head with that explanation. And I think it is important to note that later on in the video, I think Mack, you mentioned this, that the player, the Emerald Sapphire player that had this event happen to them, had this experience happen to them, noted that it took the onus on themselves and said, it's ultimately it is my responsibility to understand and be cognizant of the game state and maintain it at status quo. And to be aware of how much ink my opponent has and how much ink they should have and how many cards are in their hand and how many cards they have now. Those type of things it's a responsibility of both players in order to maintain an accurate game state, and that's stated in the rules. So just keep that in mind as you're going through it. It's not like you have to know exactly to the detail of everything that's happening, but just be aware that when you get into some of these higher level competitions, that just take that extra minute or take that extra second to really note what's happening before you make these potentially confusing turns happens. Right before you play Spooky Sight, just ask the question, how many cards in hand? How much ink do you have? All right, here's my Spooky Sight. Now you have 5 more cards in your inkwell, that type of thing. Just to like make it easier for you to understand if you talk. That helps me at least just to talk through it. Anything else we want to talk about regarding either of these 2 events that we brought up, or are we good to move on?
I think my final takeaway would just be like, be kind, be gracious, still like, I guess I will always personally anticipate like the best in people, and like I'm not going to expect people to try to cheat. Like I think you can still approach any tournament, whether it's a set champs or a bigger tournament, that like assume that the person is going to do right. I think the other part is just you do have to pay attention, right? Like don't just be like, when am I going to get cheated today, right? But like just make sure that you do have a semblance of like the game state throughout the game, and that is just one more thing you have to pay attention to, and that's not always easy, right? Especially in these longer games. But I think it was important that that guy did ultimately acknowledge that like part of this is on me like not catching it, which okay, sure, but like you're on stream, you're kind of focusing on a lot of things too, so like I get how you'd miss it. But I think it is a good learning opportunity to say that like assume the best in people, but also just like do keep an eye on things. And we oftentimes, when we're even just playtesting, we'll ask, how many cards in hand, and like just getting a sense all the time of like how much ink they're on, how many cards are in their hand, and that would have potentially saved that.
I always think immediately of Uncle Scrooge, Connor. Almost before every single turn, after about 5 or 6, he just goes, cards in hand. And usually he's playing some sort of green deck, and I'm thinking, okay, Bend of My Will's coming, cool. So right now I have 2 is my usual answer. Like, I have 2 for now, or something like that, because I know that eventually, or at some point, I'm going to be losing those cards in my hand, and I will no longer have any cards in hand. It just becomes a habit that I think we give them a hard time for it, but it's really a good habit to have, of like being cognizant of the game state and slowing your mind down just a step to be like, all right, check in. And now we can move on and make our decisions with the gameplay. But always ask, cards in hand?
Yeah, great point. And that, again, I think that's something I've had to learn too, is like, you're so, engulfed in what your own hand is and how much ink you have, whereas you truly need to pay attention to your opponent too. And that not only from like I'll say game board safety perspective, but like it just gets you better at the game by thinking about what your opponent's potential play lines are going to be too. So that's a good way to think about it as well. But my kind of wrap up point with regards to these unsportsmanlike conduct and controversies over these events, and I think the irony is that in one event the controversy was with the organizing group or what have you, and not the players, whereas the other event, I thought the group kind of did well eventually. But the controversy was with the players. So they were kind of almost 180 in that aspect. But I want to make this point about the Hong Kong DLC. I know I came off pretty brash and intense with kind of my statements on my feelings on this. But that being said, I'm a basketball referee. I come from being trained as an official, being a judge, so to speak, in what I do. So I understand, I get a lot of flack for what I do in the sport that I love to be a judge in, right? So I can understand that perspective and trying to make those calls. But I think it's something that I've learned too in kind of my basketball refereeing background is at the end of the day, let the players play. People are there to see the players, and you're there to ensure that the players are safe, and then ultimately the players are following by the rules. And I think in this case, the players were following by the rules. It was just kind of like a silly, I just got to slide the other card over and no harm, no foul, right? But on that kind of final point, I do feel for the judges. It's a hard job. So and there's a lot going on, and these events are huge. There's a lot of decisions that have to be made rapid fire for those judging teams. So I truly appreciate what they do. We've gotten to know a couple, at least from our side of things locally, who have helped us immensely in understanding the rules in this game. So they have a hard job, and it takes a lot to be a part of a DLC. So it's just kind of unfortunate the way that this one played out. Secondly, with Richmond, I on the judging side of things, I think they did like good in ultimately what happened. Ultimately, the footage was reviewed, and the player that cheated was disqualified. So that's really step one. Step two was, I think, from a compensation perspective for the player that got the cheating, that was cheated against. There was some compensation that was worked out behind the scenes, is my understanding. I don't know what that is. I'm not saying I do. I'm not trying to hide anything, but like there was some, they were done well, right? Like they did the right thing in kind of compensating to the person who had this happen to them. So very much kudos to that, to the tournament organizers there in doing the right thing and ensuring that cheating is not allowed. And if you get cheated on against, like at least there'll be some compensation your way in the sense of like trying to correcting a wrong in that aspect. So these things are happening a lot. There are a lot of big tournaments coming up, and I think very much a lot of it stems from the fact that there was such a gap between the two seasons in season 1 and 2. Ironically, this kind of makes me excited for like season 3, because I think season 3 is ultimately when a lot of the kinks are going to be out, and we're truly going to have a strong feeling of what the professional scene is going to look like from a DLC perspective. So I actually, in my initial frustrations, as I've already spoke to, like at kind of the light at the end of the tunnel is like there's a lot that you can learn from here, and it can make those events in the future that much more enjoyable and fun from the players and a spectator perspective.
And looking at the future, Winterspell will be part of that, and we promised Winterspell, so let's get into Winterspell. So the new cards in this set all were revealed, and so now we have a full 204 card set ahead of us, in front of us, ready for us to pick apart and pick out our favorite cards and some of our least favorite cards and some of the scariest cards we don't want to play but don't want to play against either. But before we get into specific cards, there are some new interesting effects coming this way. First and foremost is the underdog effect on some of these cards. So these are 2-cost cards, one in every color. And the underdog effect reads that if this is your first turn but you are not the first player, then you may spend this card or play this card for 1 less ink. So effectively, the cost cards are playable on turn 1 if you are the second person to play in the game. And I think this is a very positive approach and a very unique approach to try to even out play-draw disparity that we've talked about a couple times in previous podcasts about sometimes it's in Lorcana, it's just so much about who gets to go first. Is it one who gets to win the game, basically, or is it always in the driver's seat? And I think these are a set of cards that potentially may swing the tempo just enough for it to not feel as disparaging to lose every single die roll as Nathaniel does for every single tournament he goes to. There's the next one I want to mention. There was a huge emphasis on a number of cards across the set about cards leaving the discard, and there is a legendary Ana card that capitalizes on this by it's a 5-cost 5/5 that shifts for 0. If a card has left your discard or left a player's discard on this turn. And so then there's this huge swing effect where you could have this giant character out very early in the game if you have the right setup for it. So there's a couple other enablers for that, and there's even a card from Reign of Jafar a couple sets back that also enables this cards leaving the discard and the Queen Jealous Beauty. So we talked about it before, but I just wanted to note that is a mechanic that is coming, is cards leaving the discard. So your discards are no longer as safe as you thought they once were. So keep an eye out for that. There's also a very unique card in John Smith, which is a 5-cost uninkable steel card. The most important and interesting piece of it is the fact that it has this, what I'm calling a lightning rod effect. Players that have been engaged with Magic previously are calling it a magnet effect. What it does, what the card reads, is that if this card must be chosen, or this character must be chosen for all actions and abilities, if able. So on both turns, things like Cheshire Cat, if you boost the Cheshire Cat, you must target John Smith for both the damage removal and the damage placing. So effectively nothing happens. If you play an Elsa, you have to exert the John Smith. If you play a Thunderbolt, you have to deal damage to John Smith. You can't choose anything else. So it's a lightning rod that it's attracting all the actions and abilities while it is on the field. So that's an interesting card as well. And then there's a return of locations, I think is the last one I want to just brief before we jump into specific cards. There's a number of locations that are coming in this set. It seems like there was a return of emphasis on locations and location synergies in this set as well. I know Ruby got a handful of synergies that are really interesting for a lot of people to talk about. There's some really good Ruby locations that came in addition to that. There's some other, there's an Emerald location that's now an evasive location if there's an evasive character there. So that's really interesting. Now, even the locations are getting in on the evasive wars here. So I think there's a lot of interesting deck building choices to be made in Winterspell. I'm interested to hear what y'all's thoughts are on specific cards that you wanted to bring up and highlight. Obviously doing our usual to flip through things, and if we're able to, maybe we can pull them up as we talk about them if anybody has that prepped and ready to go. Mac, what did you want to add?
I think I want to talk about this underdog effect. To your point about the play draw disparity, so far that's been, I wouldn't say monumental, but it's been noticeable in the game with play draw, and we've seen a lot of win percentages tend to be higher for those who are on the play versus those who start the game on the draw. And I like the fact, I think this is another example of Ravensburger is listening. It just takes a while for those effects to come into play in a TCG just due to the nature of how long things take. Like, sets are released every 3 months. So, like, and they're anywhere from 6 to 10 sets ahead. So it's like it takes time for people to write the effects of new cards, where we see complaints that we had 6 sets ago now start coming to effect as these new cards are printed, right? And I think it's very important to highlight the positive aspect of that Ravensburger is listening in their game design with the with feedback through the community. And I think this underdog effect is exactly that. I personally, looking at red-blue, have started looking at those specific red-blue underdogs. With this specific set in Winterspell, color has an underdog card, which is great. So they all can take advantage of that. I really like the red one because he's a 2-cost inkable and he's 4/2, which is massive for a 2-cost character. For those of you who are, I think we're going to try and pull it upstream. If not, yes, the Liquidator. If this is, and he's reckless, so that's kind of the downside. It's a 4/2 body, but he's reckless. But you can still sing One Jump Ahead with red blue. So that's kind of the toy I've been playing with the underdog mechanic was this red Liquidator card. It caught my eye for sure, so we'll see if it ends up making it into meta lists for red-blue. And then one last thing I wanted to point out. Your point about locations, you said making a comeback. I would say, like, use that loosely. I don't think this set is the set where we will see a lot of locations. However, I think they're setting the stage for what is to come over the course of the next couple sets. I think locations will be prioritized this set and maybe the next couple sets, especially with Pixar. There's going to be a lot of fun new locations coming out with those specific franchises. And the fact that Ravensburger, rightfully so, because it's one of the most popular franchises in Disney. Elsa, the Ruby Elsa, is very much, her abilities are location based. So, like, they want all their Elsa cards to be good. And the fact that Elsa card is specific to having locations, playing locations for lower costs, questing for a lot while she's at a location. I think that's ultimately her goal. Yeah, the Ice Artisan, the 6-cost inkable 5/5 shift 4. First ability, Endless Winter. When you play this character, and whenever you play a location, you may exert chosen character with 3 strength or less. Again, Force Exert, powerful ability. But Distant Call, her second ability, while this character is at a location, she gets +3 quest. So she's now a 6-cost inkable 5/5 quest for 4. And in Ruby, that matters. So like I said, the locations aren't blowing me away right now for what we get out of them, but I think they're setting the stage. And if they want Elsa to be as amazing as the community and just Disney fanatics think she is, and my 3-year-old thinks she is, I think this is a card to keep an eye on in the next coming sets.
I will stay on the topic of red-blue, and there's actually 2 blue cards in particular that I'm really interested in. One of them is Pete, the Ghost of Christmas Future. Actually, pretty sure my young kids started watching this movie and we had to not finish it. Um, but this is a really interesting card, and I think it gives some really nice filtering and card draw effectively to a blue deck. During just some initial kind of playtesting with this, I was pretty impressed with its ability in, a longer matchup to really start to make a pretty big impact on the match, particularly for decks that are maybe built to be a little bit slower and want to see lots of cards via filtering. And he's also a 5/5. So like it's just such a big body that like if the deck doesn't have like really clean removal, he kind of sticks around for quite a while. So that's a really interesting card, a really good one in my opinion. The other one is the 4-cost Bell Snowfield Strategist. And she is a super rare. 2/3, quest for 2. Whenever one of your characters is banished, you may put that card from your discard into your inkwell face down and exerted. And this is actually a card where our resident Scrooge McDuck showed me this and kind of the power that this card has, where in some of these like blue decks, your earlier stuff, right? Like your T-Pos or whatever small thing you might have played, right? Like they already did their job to like get ink. If you just like run it into something and maybe you banish maybe your two smaller characters in, the two of them combine to take out like a bigger character, right? You got to remove one of their threats, and then those two small characters of yours go into your inkwell. So they did their earlier job, like Tipo inking already, getting the extra ink all ready to ramp, but now they get to like hyper ramp you. So it's where it's kind of like you're getting all this extra benefit. So I got to see kind of the power of that, where maybe the two smaller characters run into my thing, they become ink, and all of a sudden the blue player now is at 6 ink, and it's like turn 3. Like that's insane. So I think this card actually could definitely have some juice. Like, yeah, it's a 2/3 4 cost, which that stat line is kind of stinky, bit of a weenie, if you will. But like this card, I think in like the right decks could really like hyper ramp you, and a lot of the blue decks are just kind of trying to slow down the opponent. So being rewarded in some ways for just like maybe banishing one of their characters, but also still getting the ink, it just feels amazing. So I think this card could have some juice, particularly for the decks that want to hyper ramp.
I love this card. I can't tell you enough how much I think this Bell Snowfield Strategist is going to be meta in all blue iterations of blue and ramp. Reason being is, well, thinking back to the decks of old, let's take a trip back to down the timeline, right? All red blue decks back in the day, your goal was turn 2 ramp into a 4-cost character. And usually you had 4 copies of Grammatala and 4 copies of Hiram. And then you also had anywhere from 2 to 4 copies of the song How Far You'll Go, right? So like you had so many options in that 4-cost slot, where it was almost guaranteed that you would get that combo. 2-cost card on 2 into a 4-cost card on 3. Since then, and since the Hiram ban, really, we did okay because you still had the Tala and you still had the How Far I'll Go combo. But ever since rotation, like you've lost that combo, especially with Sapphire. We got the first part of it with Cinderella in Whispers, and now we got Belle. So now we have 4 copies of Cinderella and 4 copies of Belle, and so it's just making the probability of hitting that 4-cost card on turn 3 that much more likely. And that's why I think we've been seeing a lot of people get really excited about red-blue, because we're getting those curves that red-blue has missed since rotation. And it's a princess. Cinderella can do Cinderella things. So not only if you play this with the Cinderella on board, you ramp with Cinderella and draw a card. Then to your point, Nathaniel, then if your weenies get banished, it's just hyper ramping you to then get you to the really big cards later. So I am so in on this card. It has an enchanted, although I think the controversy in that is that the enchanted almost looks exactly like the card, its base card, but I don't really care. I think it's my point is I think it's a great choice for an enchanted, because I think having meta cards, at least a good represented of those being enchanted. I thought one was enchanted. Maybe I'm not, not seeing it on the board, but I thought one was enchanted. Either way.
It's just not uploaded yet.
Okay, thank you. I'm very excited for this Bell card, so I'm glad you pointed it out. We're changing you yet, Nathaniel. The red blue is join the dark side, please.
I think it's most of I'm just like seeing the power level of the deck kind of come back, right? Like ever since I dipped my toes in the water with the half shark build and during set 8, I'm like, hey, this is a scary combo, especially if it can do its things. And I agree, Mac. This card definitely feels like it can certainly help be another engine for red blue to do red blue things.
I think Ryan's red blue now too, huh, Ryan?
Same thing as Nathaniel said. I think I see the power level finally coming back, and I'm itching to play some half sharks in my list, so I'm excited about that. I will transition us into talking about Nathaniel's old favorite deck, which who knows what Nathaniel's favorite deck is now? I think it's just purple plus whatever. But purple steel got some interesting cards that I wanted to talk about. So we'll talk about the steel cards first because I think we can have probably an hour-long conversation about purple. So maybe we'll save that for another podcast, but we'll definitely dive into it later. This Shang is interesting. It doesn't have alert, so there's a little outside there that you're losing some of your evasive interaction. In the mirror match, this Li Shang is really really impactful because he turns the tide and he freezes the board for your opponent, because getting to 5 characters in order to sing that Strength of a Raging Fire on curve is challenging for many Amethyst Steel decks to do. So this character will stick around and punish whatever the singer is if they choose to actually sing that song. Also can then lead into more big Demona turns, Elsa turns, into those type of force exert effects. Where you can swing the board in that way. And so this is kind of a perfectly tailored card to that. The only drawback compared to is another 3-cost drinkable option of Lexington is that you don't have the alert to challenge your opponent's evasive characters and end in that evasive war. So there's something to be said for splitting the difference and having both of them, plus then having Cobras, plus then having Cheshire Cats. Now half your deck is you're approaching a 30-year deck of just 3-cost characters. That's one card I was really interested in. And this Gantu, I think I'm very curious about. So this is a 1-cost inkable 3/3. When you play this character, choose and discard a card, quests for 1. So it's a 3/3 on turn 1, but more importantly, it is putting a card in your discard on turn 1. So then come back with the Ana combo, where I'll flip to the purple cards now. There's the legendary that we already talked about, so I'll pull it up on screen. 5-cost inkable, 5/5 quest for 1. Unusual transformation. If a card left a player's discard this turn, this card gains shift 0. And then Warm Heart. Whenever this character quests, you may gain lore equal to the lore of a character card in your discard. If you do, put that card on the bottom of your deck. Not necessarily the second part, but the first part of the shift piece works great with the 2-cost Ana. That is the shift target in this set, this 5-cost Ana. And this is Ana, Little Sister, a 2-cost inkable 2/3 quest for 1. When you play this character, you may put a card from chosen player's discard on the bottom of your deck. So you play Gantu on 1, you have a 3/3. On 2, you play Little Ana, and then you move that card from your discard to the bottom of your deck, and then you shift the big Ana, and now you have a 3/3 and a 5/5, and it's turn 2. So that is very intriguing for advancing the game state. What are y'all's thoughts on Purple Steel? Are you seeing any interesting synergies you're going to tackle or move with?
The purple legendaries have me feeling a little weird. I think the Tinkerbell, the one you haven't mentioned, is kind of buns. So we'll see if that actually makes any sort of play. I think I got Nathaniel on that one. But it looks good with the set champs promo that card is now going to be for this set. The Ana is the one where I haven't quite figured it out. We'll see where that leads. I know, to your point about what this set is going to and cards leaving the discard, it's a mechanic that seems to be taking flight in this set, and very much excited to see how that then spills into the meta and what we see about that. It's kind of interesting when talking about, and I've been comparing a lot of this to Whispers. When we looked at Whispers, that legendary lineup was so crazy. Probably the best legendary lineup we've ever seen. And then there were a couple rares and super rares that were good, right? Like Cheshire Cat, for example. Whereas this set, it's like the legendaries kind of are meh, maybe? I don't know. It's too early to tell. But I think there are a lot of good rares and super rares in this set, and even that are going to see a lot of play, at least in the initial conversations of what Winterspell might look like. So it's almost a complete 180, and I'm excited to see how that entails. And maybe that's a good thing, like flip-flopping back and forth, whereas one set you're prioritizing a lot of the expensive rare cards, and then the other one it's just like, okay, where can we fill in the gaps with our uncommons, rares, and super rares, a little bit more attainable for the player base. Maybe that's their intention, but it's just kind of a weird little thing that I've noticed, at least in the initial conversations as we're on kind of the doorsteps of this set release.
So I will call out one, and I'll take Mack's just statement that he just made a step further. There's actually a common card that I'm really excited for, and it is an amethyst card called Tigger Bouncing All the Way. And there's really two decks I could see this card being really good in. One of them is in purple steel. This could be a way, if you have a really low to the ground purple steel deck, this is your bounce option. So whether it's you pushing back their stuff, that could challenge your things and slowing them down so you can just keep busting, or pushing your dock back into your hand so that you can replay your dock, right? Like we've already seen in the past, like how powerful that can be, is bouncing docks and continuing to get the draw off of him. Can be really amazing in some of these burn purple steel decks. But this card also, I think, in Blurple will be really good on turn 3 to push back like an early high quester, because it kind of feels like in the past, like Blurple has struggled with like boards going wide too early on them, and your ability to push something back and stick a 4 strength character on turn 3, if you're in a ramp deck, that's really powerful. So I also think the fact that this also says, like for the future, right? Mack referenced the fact that locations could start seeing some rise. It's also a location. So I think that's just really powerful, where you get to sort of detempo your opponent a little bit. And that can be really powerful in like a Blurple deck. So I'm actually excited about this. And I talked about it on the last pod. Like it'd be really great if we get some like great commons and uncommons, so you don't spend a ton of money on good cards. This Tigger could definitely fill that role, I think. Another one for me that I'm excited for is actually this, like we talked about Ohana Means Family potentially being a bit of a trap. The other one that could be maybe a little interesting, maybe it's just a worse version of that in a way, but like the Wisdom of the Willow for like decks that want to quest a ton, and that's a 4-cost uninkable for the rest of this turn. Whenever one of your characters quests, you may draw a card. That could certainly be pretty powerful in a turn that you're just like, hey, this is the turn that I'm going to do the thing. I'm going to quest with 5 characters, and if they want to, challenge into all of them, I'm just going to be able to replace all of them because I'm going to play Wisdom of the Willow on this turn. So I could see this maybe having like 1 or 2 of in like a more aggressive deck. I think the question will probably remain, just like it did with Ohana Means Family, is can an aggressive deck afford to take an entire turn off to draw cards? That's probably the biggest question that you'd have with Wisdom of the Willow. I like that it doesn't have the same restriction as Ohana Means Family, needing to have like the damage piece, in the sense that you could just get to do what you want to do, which is quest.
I think this Wisdom of the Willow card starts to venture into the realm of what we saw, I think, in Reign of Jafar, when we saw Restoring the Crown, and there was another one that was kind of the similar, like exert effect or cannot challenge. Restoring Atlantis is what that one was. So those are both like higher cost, 5 or 6 cost uninkables, which for their respective decks was like the top end of their curve. I think that this is going to fall into that same category for a lot of the amber aggressive decks. So this is the top end of their curve. It doesn't really fit well. They have to ink up to it using other resources that you get there in order to regain some resources. But setting up like a 2 or 3 turn clock, which in many amber aggressive decks usually is too long of a clock. They need to win within 2 to 3 turns rather than win after those 2 to 3 turns. Where I do think this one may fit in, and it feels a little bit like a win more card in this situation, would be in like an amber amethyst control deck, or amber amethyst mid-range deck, where you're just playing for board, you're trying to win board, and then you play this to refill your hand. When you feel like your board is somewhat safe, or if you won the evasive war for a turn, you can play this to really hammer that home if you have your Dumbo or that. Those type of things where maybe you don't have ink play the Dumbo, but you want to get aggressive with your evasives. I could see that happening. Green Emerald got a lot of evasive cards. Maybe Emerald evasive focused deck maybe could work with this too. So I think this would fit better in more of like the middle of an ink curve for a deck rather than the top end, just because it is uninkable and it gets very clunky if this is all that you have left in your hand and you don't have the characters on board to support it. Even as a one or two of it kind of feels like a really bad top deck in that situation. But almost rather just play more copies of Nani or BR Guest from previous sets, or the new Nani that I'm really excited about for Amber. Let me pull up 3 cost evil, three effectively the same BR Guest. Where when you play this character, you look at the top 4 cards of your deck, you can reveal a character card with cost 2 or less and put it into your hand. The rest on the bottom of your deck and enter in the order. You play it, it replaces itself. You get another high quest looking low cost character in your hand to play on the next turn to really keep your wheels spinning and fuel the fire there. So I think that this would be an uncommon but an addition to many Amber decks to kind of fuel that reach that they're looking for to kind of get through the mid game and get through any type of control that the opponent is trying to give them. Should we talk about Pudge? Should we bring Pudge up on the screen? Talk more about Pudge?
So I think we did talk about Pudge a little bit with the Love and Lorcana. Pudge is interesting. I think the thing that we didn't notice about him on the last podcast that we had is he's a deity. So they don't get it twisted here. This card is absolutely cracked. But no, in all seriousness, I think that's it's funny with the deity thing, because like in Amber Steel decks, if you had like played a He Heralded Thunderbolt, this gets the +2 strength. That's not nothing. And just anytime you get to play something for free is really good. And I think that the sync together synergy here could really have some juice. It does feel like a bit of a pipe dream card for me. I just think it would be funny to like play 3 or 4 of these on your first turn with a Lilo. But I think it remains to be seen if he gets play. Ryan, what are your thoughts?
I think we'll see some play. I don't know if it's on turn 1, because I know there's a 1 cost Lilo that's printed in this set. But I don't think it's. I personally don't see its value in this deck. I see that there's multiple 2 cost Lilos that are valuable. The 2 cost Lilo Escape Artist from Azurite Sea is one, and then the other one is a 2 cost Uncable Steel Lilo. That's a 1/2 quest for 2, and has the effect that whatever will be dealt damage during each of your opponent's turn. The first time this character would take damage, she takes no damage instead. So it requires 2 challenges, which requires the actions of 2 cards or characters of your opponent's board to deal with this 1 card. And so early on in the game, getting this out plus a whole host of other cards for your opponents to have to deal with, I think this gets to be a very, very sticky card. Kind of rivaling that 2 couple slot Nala fills, being a 0/2 quest for 2 and has 1 bonus lore if it has no damage. So I think that this is something that would be an interesting addition and kind of solidifies the role of Pudge as, you're likely going to be able to trigger Pudge if you were to see it, because you have more Lilos than you have Pudges, and then you get a free 1/3 quester for free on that turn, just for the cost of having that, no longer having the card in your hand to do something with. So I think your ink curve has to become even lower in order to play that many Pudges. And so that pipe dream that you mentioned prior to us recording of Lilo plus a million Pudges and then Sing Beyond the Horizon, I think Beyond the Horizon gets pretty clunky if you don't specifically see all those Pudges to play them out. So I don't know that is actually going to be a play line that many decks are going to take, but it may be in some sort of like slightly mid-range deck that plays like Troubadours and Ursula Vanessas in addition to the Lilo and Pudge package to be able to sing that Beyond the Horizon more consistently. I think that might be possible. So we'll see where it goes, but I think there's plenty of Lilos to go around to make Pudge viable. So I am excited about Pudge. I do think it'll be interesting to see how it fits into the meta.
Yeah, the playline that Ryan's referencing is one that I thought would be hilarious, where you like play a Lilo and 3 Pudge on turn 1, and then turn 2 you sing Beyond the Horizon and discard your opponent down to 3 cards and probably just win the game at that point. So yeah, it'll happen, right? It's consistent. But I think one last card that I wanted to talk about, Ryan, and I know I'm stealing your Amethyst Thunder here, but it's can't hold it back anymore from the last set on a body in a way, and it's this Morgana Macabre, super interesting card. It's the big one, so the shift one, and I don't know that you'd even necessarily have to play this as a shift in a Blurple deck. And so this is a 6 cost quest for 1 6/6 body. When you play this character, you may choose an opposing character and move 1 damage from each other character to them. So I think there could be a world where like in damage, I mean maybe this doesn't get as much play just because of Cheshire Cat existing, but like in decks where like you've got some damage kind of floating around, I think this could fill maybe a bit of the like at 6 ink, like play a really big character that like can do some stuff too on play. It could be interesting. I don't know that you'd necessarily want to run both the 3 cost and the 6 cost, particularly in Blurple, but it is a big body. It does get do something that's kind of powerful. But now I'm realizing that it's only 1 damage from each other character and can't hold it back anymore. It gets to just like move everything onto their guy. So maybe I'm talking myself out of it now.
I have a couple more, and one of them is, I'd be remiss to say or not talk about the board wipes. But the first one I want to make sure that gets some love is the Accoud et Immudi, right? The the new song from Lilo and Stitch, the 3-cost uninkable. You pay 2 less for the next character you play this turn, and then draw a card. So again, very important. Replaces itself. But I think this is very much an Amber identity, which is great. So I think it's great that they're branching out identities, but then in the core of each color, they still have those 2 or 3 kind of things that they want them to do. And one of Amber's seems to be is cheating out ink by paying less for a next character, next action, things of that nature, right? So, and this is a perfect example of that. So I'm curious to see where this comes into play, especially when we're talking about the underdog effect with Angel, the 2-cost underdog Angel. This is the card that goes with that, right? Because that Angel is a singer 3, and this is a 3-cost song. I'm excited to see what this looks like for 2 color combinations that haven't seen a lot of love lately in Amber Sapphire and Amber Ruby. Those have not been truly or really meta-defining for a long time, if ever at all. And I think this card has some potential in both of those decks, with Amber Ruby tending to be very character-heavy, and then Amber Sapphire with the ramp, playing those important ramp cards earlier in the game, I think is huge. So I think this is a big one. But then you talk about the board wipes, right? You have the Raging Storm in Amber, the 8-cost uninkable, just banish all characters, action, not a song like Be Prepared was. But I think, although as much as I loved Be Prepared, looking at Raging Storm and what it provides for the state of the game, I think this overall is a healthier way of going about it in terms of balancing the game. Now, granted, I don't see much more other than in Amber Sapphire, because you need a lot of ink to play this. But like the strong payoff of completely resetting the board, it being an action and not a song, I think may be where it needs to be in terms of balancing the game, because Be Prepared was so crucial in so many parts of Ruby Sapphire, Ruby Amethyst, things of that nature, that almost to a point where it's just like it was kind of involved in every single deck, and it was broken because you could sing it and then you could just slap all your characters on the board, right? TKP won. He won a DLC due to the fact that he ran a shark build with 4 copies of Be Prepared and then just slapped McDuck Manners on the board after that, right? So this was huge in that aspect of how he won a DLC and what the deck he ultimately became famous for. The other one is Wreck-It Ralph, the boost 1, 7-cost uninkable. I think it's a 3/4 quest for 3. I don't remember. I don't have it on top of me. But for every, once this character is banished, banish all characters that have the same strength or less. That's essentially what the text reads. And I think in a way it's a lot more setup required, but is truly important in that board wipe. And the reason why the boost comes into play is for every card underneath it, this character gains 1+ strength. So if you keep boosting it, you give it more and more strength, odds are you're going to be catching all the strong and high cost strength characters as well, which could really truly become a board wipe as opposed to just a semi board wipe or quasi board wipe. This is a legendary where I'm still trying to see where we see and ultimately where it goes, but I'm intrigued enough to at least put on my certified picker cap and see if people who are much smarter at me than theory crafting and deck building, if they can come up with something really fun with this Wreck-It Ralph, and I will gladly jump aboard that hype train if someone figures it out. So, anyone else have any fun thoughts? Nathaniel, what are your thoughts on the Wreck-It Ralph, specifically the one I just spoke to?
I think that one is a really interesting card. I'm still not sure how much he will see play. I think there's interesting ways that you could banish him to kind of create that board wipe, especially if, you're really focusing on building up your inkwell and you kind of put this character down as like a, hey, when he goes, like, so do all of your guys. So better be careful. It kind of creates some of that. I think the card that still kind of makes me giggle a little bit, it feels a little bit like a troll from Ravensburger, is that 4-cost Maui Snow Slider, where it's like the Rush Maui from set 1, but it's 1 cost less, he's a little bit weaker. Instead of Reckless, he could quest for 2 maybe, but like he has Rush, I think it was almost their way of saying like, hey, a 6/5 inkable 5-cost with Rush is crazy good, that like this feels a bit more balanced.
What about Copper though?
Copper is super legit, but again, like that's like that 5 willpower, super high strength, and it's a 6 cost instead of being 5. So it kind of feels like they created these 2 cards in conjunction to kind of be like, these are the 2 halves of what used to be like the Maui whole. Which, for what it's worth, I think the Copper is awesome.
Yeah. Copper looks like an incredible card to kind of regain board control after ramping super hard into 6 costs on turn 4. One other card I wanted to chat about is the 2-cost inkable 1/4 Mulan in Emerald, Resourceful Recruit. Whenever this character quests, gain lore equal to her strength to a maximum of 6 lore. I don't know if this fits into any other deck other than Amber Amethyst Chernodog or Dogs list, because you have that 2-cost tramp that boosts strength based on number of other characters. Potentially you could run it in like a Ruby Emerald deck, because there's a new 2-cost inkable Song that gives +5 strength to a character. So that could be a way to quest for 6 in 1 turn. But I think the more consistent way is in the Amber Amethyst Dogs deck. And I think this really, 1/4 is tough to deal with for a lot of decks. Getting a single tramp trigger on this to quest for 6 in 1 single turn is immense, especially when that deck is going so fast already, and you're going to be at probably 12 or 15 by the time this hits its 6 cost threshold. And even questing for 4 or 5 just a single time is way above ink efficiency for this 2-cost character. When you're playing out to the board and you're just letting things stand upright until you play your tramp, and then you're going in that deck a lot of times. So it creates a lot of static board states that I think this Mulan card can take a huge advantage of and really capitalize on those big swing turns where you play that 2-cost tramp to boost its strength to 4 or 5 or maybe even 6 strength, and then quest for 6 plus whatever else you're questing with on the rest of the board. So I think that this is one that will be necessary to craft a deck to deal with, because if you even encounter it once, I think you can create a lot of non-games if you're not ready for it.
I want to take that card one step further.
Go ahead, yeah.
Ryan, and I think that we now see why Ravensburger printed and made Daisy the legendary of choice from last set, because when she quests, she has support. So if you played this earlier and you shifted your big Daisy in a blue-green deck, you could quest with it, give it strength to this, and then this thing quests for 5. How about that?
Wouldn't that be 3 inks?
You'd have to. So what you'd have to probably do is you would play this, and then on a different turn you'd have your shift target Daisy, and then you would shift the Daisy onto the small Daisy, and then quest with that first, then this. But you could do this as early as like turn 4 in a blue-green deck with the Daisy.
I don't mean to call you out, but isn't little Daisy Amber, big Daisy Sapphire, and this Mulan is Emerald?
There's a blue detective Daisy that's a 2-cost.
Oh, okay. Well,
so it's possible. You could do it.
The more you know.
You could do it, and then all of a sudden, like that turn with just those 2 characters, you'd quest for 7 on turn 4.
Still learning with Winterspell, and so much to learn with this new deck. Thanks for the check on me. Makes sense.
Well, I mean
now.
that you made the point, right? You're the one who says this. I think probably the most, Mac. That kind of, hey, there's a plan, right? Like these cards get released, and you see more synergies. Like I said, maybe they had that play line in mind, so they said, yeah, give her support as well. That 4/6, legendary. It might not look that great now, but once we print this Mulan, everybody's gonna say, hey, that's the move. Blue green.
If you're already playing Emerald Sapphire and doing this support shenanigans, why not just play Alice Growing Girl? And then everything gets support. And then you support this Mulan up to whatever. Then you quest the Mulan and give the strength back to Alice and gain an additional 5 lore.
I swear,
And
you
put
think
button to
Alice. You would think Alice is your favorite Disney character. You talk about all the Alice cards.
He does. Is that your favorite movie, Ryan?
They just have really unique card text. That's all. Well, I think we've belabored the point long enough for this week. We can always come back to more cards next week when we have maybe we're going to focus a little bit more on the limited scene next week and talk about how we're excited for the actual pre-release week of Winterspell next week. So, thank you to all of our listeners. Thanks for tuning in again. Feel free to leave us a comment and like the video or like the podcast wherever you listen to it and consume the content. You can follow us on Instagram if you're interested. We can post some content on there periodically. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, YouTube. We have both the video version and the audio version available on YouTube. Again, feel free to leave a comment across any of these platforms, and we'll do our best to respond as soon as we're able to see it. Obviously, as you are all aware, and as you all are as well, we have busy lives outside of Lorcana, but we do love the hobby and we love what we do. So we're excited to interact with you on a regular basis. So feel free to engage with us, and we're looking forward to seeing you in the next one. Adventure ho, and let's get the duck out of here.